Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having an awesome day today, and welcome back to the second video of Vintage Week. I'm so excited to be continuing in the series, and I hope you enjoyed the first video. If you did not get to see that one, I will link to it in a card here in case you're curious to check it out. But today's video is going to be all about shopping for vintage, and this is something that I made a video about a few years ago, and I thought it was high time that I did a bit of an updated version because I've changed a few things with my vintage shopping habits. And I thought it would just be fun to go over my process and also share with you some resources that I found really helpful over the years. So if you're interested in getting started with shopping for vintage, I hope you'll find it helpful, and I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. Now, when I talk about vintage, I am usually talking about pieces that are from the 1990s or before. Some people use vintage to refer to just used clothing in general, but I usually would take it back to the 90s or before. So just for the context of this video, that is what I'm talking about. So there are two main ways that I like to shop for vintage. The first way is in thrift shops, and the second way is online. So let's divide this into two categories and start with talking about thrift shopping. You can definitely find really great vintage pieces at thrift shops if you're willing to take the time and dig for them. I have found pieces ranging from the 1950s all the way to now at thrift stores, and it's really a great way to get really affordable vintage pieces, but it definitely takes some extra work. Before you head out to your local thrift store to start trying to find vintage pieces, it would be a great idea to try and familiarize yourself with a bit of fashion history. If you understand the silhouettes of different eras and the fabrics and different ways that clothes were made during those times, it's going to be a lot easier for you to identify the age of the clothing. So while you're at the thrift store, there are two main ways that I like to try and determine the age of a garment. The first way is the label. So when you look at a label, if it is sewn in by hand, and that will usually look like little stitches at the corners of the label, you know it's probably an older piece because in the 1970s they began to sew labels on by machine. So that is a good indicator of the garment's age. Another great indicator is the zipper. Plastic zippers were not used until the 1970s, so if there's a metal zipper, particularly in the side of the garment, that is a good sign that it is 1960s or before. One great resource if you are trying to date the age of a garment more specifically is from the Vintage Fashion Guild, and it is their label resource. That is such a helpful thing to look at. I used it to compare a label on a cardigan that I had purchased at Goodwill. I was able to date it to the 1940s by finding a comparable label by the same brand on the website. So if you have some vintage pieces that you're wondering how old are, that is a great resource to try and figure it out. But when it comes to finding vintage at the thrift store, I would really recommend going consistently and really digging around and looking, because you never know where these pieces will turn up, and it is definitely a bit of a treasure hunt, but it can be really well worth it. So when it comes to vintage shopping, I love hunting for treasures at the thrift store, but I also love to shop online, and shopping online is actually my preferred way to do it because it is just so much more convenient. It's really easy to type in exactly what you're looking for and find it. Now with that, there is a bit of a price inflation because people see the market and they know what they can get for it. And there are a lot of vintage shops that are just beautifully curated shops that have some amazing pieces, but usually you will find that the prices are really high at these shops. One reason that they are high is that the people that run the shops usually have the items mended and dry cleaned and do all of that work for you, so that is factored into the cost. So a way to get much more affordable vintage is to go to somewhere like eBay and look for things that are a little bit dingier and maybe need a little bit of TLC. And that is my favorite way to do it because I would much rather just be able to fix something up myself than pay somebody else to do it. So if you don't mind putting in a little bit of work and elbow grease, you can usually find a pretty good deal on your vintage pieces. So when I shop on eBay, I usually have a pretty clear idea of what I'm looking for and use keywords to match that. So something like a vintage 1960s basket bag, I would plug all those keywords in and see what comes up. And then sometimes I will even have specific brands that I know of in an era that I really like. So something like vintage Coach for handbags, I know I really love those, and different brands that have been popular throughout the different eras. Now keep in mind that with eBay, sometimes the listings that are the least visually appealing are the best pieces. I have a gorgeous 1940s evening gown that I purchased on eBay for around $20, and I remember looking at the listing and I could tell that it was something that had a lot of detail, but it was really poorly photographed and it was difficult to see what I was actually getting, but it ended up being one of my best vintage finds of all time. So sometimes it's really worth the risk with eBay to get something that looks a little bit dingier to really create a beautiful collection of vintage items. So those are kind of just my thoughts on shopping for vintage online and in thrift stores. I hope that you found that helpful. But one last point, if you are interested in collecting vintage clothing and accessories, let people in your life know, because you might be surprised who will just randomly have some vintage stuff, some things that they've held over from other people that they might be willing to give to you. I've had a lot of people who find out that I'm interested in vintage and will just offer to let me look at different things that they aren't using and that they would like to see being used. So that can be a great thing. Just be open about your interest in vintage and let people know and see what comes your way. Alright guys, so that is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. Let me know what your advice for other people is on shopping for vintage down in a comment below, and we can share and hopefully create some helpful discussion. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, I would love for you to subscribe if you're interested. I'm posting videos every day this week all about vintage and vintage inspired fashion, so I hope you guys will join me for the rest of the videos in the series. I would really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you in the next one. Bye!
In the sight of you alone, here I'll stay.